Okay, Improvisation Center is back again with, as you can see, the Scion. Yep, the pain in the ass car. What are we doing on this thing this time? Well, changing a power steering hose. Yep, power steering hose is pissing oil everywhere, and we're tired of throwing oil in the damn thing while it's being used, so it's got to come out. But unlike some of the other how-to videos, this one's probably going to be involving a lot more pictures than anything, just on the premise that it's a pain in the ass to get up under here. You can already see that I got the car on ramps because you got to be able to slide way underneath this thing in order to access everything. The line in particular, it's bolted up. It's the high pressure line bolted up to the power steering pump, and it goes to the rack and pinion assembly, and all that shit is tucked away in there. You can get to it, but you're gonna have to snake your arms around through some shit and probably use a variety of different tools in order to get in there, and you're gonna be making incremental turns on bolts because of the tight quarters. But go and slide under here just to kind of give you a visual of what we're dealing with. Let's see if I could zoom in on this piece of shit right here. That thing right there, that's our power steering pump, and the hose, not the one with the worm clamp on it, but the one next to it, it's got a bolt holding the end onto the pump, kind of similar to a brake line. That's our high pressure line. As you can see, that bolt looks like it's probably going to be a 15 or a 16 millimeter wrench. So that's one of the tools that's going to be necessary, if not a wrench, ratchet wrench. I'm not sure if a socket's going to get up in there all too well. We will see. Then that line, if I can get my hands in there. Well, actually, no, screw it. That leaky line that's dead center in the frame here is our power steering line. As you can see, it's got oil all over it, and it snakes all the way back. Not the upside down here. It goes back to our rack and pinion steering right here. Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, this shit right here, our rack and pinion assembly, that line goes back right there that I'm pointing at. It snakes back, goes into a metal line, and then let's slide up under here a little bit more. You got a clamp right there holding the two lines, and the top one right here, that one right there is the line in question. It routes all the way to the driver's side. This is really fucking insane. And it goes somewhere in there with a compression fitting, and that looks like it's probably a 15 millimeter flare nut on there. So yeah, like I say, tight quarters, pain in the ass. So we're underneath here. Like I say, first thing is getting the car up high enough. Ideally, this would be done on a lift in a shop, as these cars seem to be designed for. But if you got some ramps, it'll be a force multiplier in helping you get this shit done as safely as possible. So I'm gonna grab some tools and I'm gonna get up in here and pull some shit loose, take a couple pictures, and update you in a second. Stand by. Okay, the bolt in question is a 17 millimeter bolt. I was able to actually get my hand in from the side right here. As you could see, got my arm in from the side and was able to get this wrench on the bolt good enough to where I could get the right position for maximum leverage to break that bolt and get it loose. But because of the way the hoses are all situated, it's really a short throw as far as each turn or each cycle of the wrench. I always have to take the wrench off. Now, you could probably manage this with a ratcheting wrench or a short socket. So this part here, I'll get this off in a second, so we can call that more or less done. I have to see if there's any little mounting tabs or something that also need to be pulled off, along with the one that I pointed out earlier, kind of somewhere in the back there at the rack. But let's get this off the power steering pump first. All right, got the hose loose as stated. See right there, there is one little tab. You could probably see it dead center, right? I'll get my finger there, right there, that little tab right there. I never reconnected that tab when I put the engine back in. Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you ask me. But that tab will probably be attached on your car if you've never been underneath it. So just a little note. But right now, the hose is more or less disconnected and out of play. There is, like I say, if this fucking camera would focus, the rubber line terminates at that point about right there, and that's where all our metal line starts. Now there is another bracket back there that I have to disconnect in order to separate it from the return line, and then the flare nut on the driver's side, like I said. But one other thing to make note of is when you take that thing off, this is actually old, but you got the bolt right here that holds that end of the hose onto the pump, and then you got this double washer set up that goes on either side of the end, and the bolt goes through one end here, through the end of the hose, and then through this end here, and then into the pump to help seal it. Like I say, it's almost like a brake line setup, so try not to jack this up because you're going to need this, and if somehow you end up with two pieces, you might be in trouble trying to keep all that shit together when you reassemble it. So just to make a mental note, keep that shit safe. So now I'm going to slide deeper underneath this car so I could get the other fittings taken apart and continue this shit show. All right, the little bolt that holds this bracket in place is a 10mm bolt. It's easy to access, but you'll probably have a bit of a time trying to keep everything sturdy enough to get enough of a swing to loosen the bolt up quickly. It's doable. You might get aggravated when you keep dropping your wrench, unless you got a ratcheting wrench. I'm working with a socket, so yeah. But this is actually an easy bolt to get to. But I got the bracket loose enough now that I should be able to get our metal line free when I take it loose from the driver's side of the rack and pinion. So that'll be the next thing. All right. Let's see if I get my hand in there. Camera don't want to, right where my little finger's at. These two fittings right here are the lines going to the rack and pinion. This one in the foreground right here is the one we need to take loose for our high pressure side. So I'm gonna go see what size wrench this is and get this garbage off. Okay, I'm in the left fender well right now, looking right at the two fittings on the rack. I'm thinking our best approach to doing this is probably going to be to just pull both of these fuckers off. This way, nothing will be in the way. I'll pull the low side one off, and that'll give me the open space I need to get to our high side line. So go ahead and get this off. And this, by the way, appears to be a 17mm flare nut on here. So go ahead and get this shit off. All right. Got our hoses off of the rack and pinion. Got a little bit of a mess, of course, so hopefully you either got an oil pan or a bunch of kitty litter to catch this shit. But got the lines off of the rack, so now I could be able to work our bad high side line off of this car so I can start working our new one in. So let's get this garbage all the way out. All right, got our old hose off. In order to get it off, you have to do some careful wiggling around to get around the shield on the exhaust and around everything else under there. It's not too hard, just got to take your time to carefully move shit around and work the thing out. At least you got enough room on the driver's side in order to work this section of hose that way to the driver's side, in order to get you the extra clearance to get the rubber shit to clear enough to get this stuff out of the way. Got our new hose here, and if you remember anything about what I said about those washers to help seal it, well, these bitches that made the doggone new hose gave me separate washers. So more than likely we're not going to use that garbage. We're going to use our single washer setup, because I'm not going to get pissed off with that right there. If it seals, awesome. If not, then I'll be forced to use that garbage, but I'm using my original stuff. So with that all said, we're going to go ahead and start putting everything back together in reverse, obviously. So let's do it. Well, something that I probably should have done in the beginning, but I ended up doing when I went to put the end on the power steering pump, I ended up removing the return line. Or no, this ain't the return line, I'm sorry. This is the line where it feeds from the reservoir into the power steering pump. This big ass rubber hose right here is in the fucking way. Should have took it off in the beginning. That was a dumbass move not to take it off. So I took it off now. It gave me extra clearance to be able to maneuver the end of the hose and get the bolt in place so I could get the thing to grab tread and get it bolted down. But this is actually, I'm in the right fender well somewhat. It's another approach you can use to get in there as well. Either way, it's still pretty tight. But yeah, when you do this crap, take that fucking hose off first before you do anything. Save you some grief. I didn't do it. I had some grief. Now I don't have any more grief because I was able to get our hose bolted up. So let me finish tightening this garbage up, and then I'm going to work my way back to the driver's side, hooking up our clamps and the compression nut thingy on the other side on the rack and pinion, and finish this shit up. All right, got our hoses back on, got the end bolted up, put our feed tube back to the power steering pump. Go to the other side here real quick. Oh God, I hate wiggling around underneath this fucking car. Let's see, where are we at? Here we go. Got our rack and pinion right there. We got the two lines secured back to that. Now, as is the case with a lot of this aftermarket stuff, even though they have bends in the tubes and everything, stuff is never quite as the original stuff is. So you'll end up having to manipulate these tubes to try to get things to line up somewhat if you're trying to reuse these little retaining straps like this one right here. Or you can just go flat out bootleg and zip tie everything. I'm trying to slowly work everything in a way where I'll be able to bolt everything back up as it was, so I can at least be confident enough that this stuff is not going to vibrate around and have premature failure. But yeah, just kind of giving you that visual. Squiggling this line back in here is about as much of a pain in the ass as it is taking the old one out. So again, you just have to take your time, make sure all the other stuff is removed as mentioned before, so you'll have as much clearance as possible in order to do this stuff, and should be all right. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this wrapped up with this little fitting right here, not fitting, but clamp, and then do one more check on all the ends to make sure everything is nice and snug, and then we're gonna fill this sucker up with oil and fire it up. Stand by. Another thing to make note of to help you out in putting the bracket back on, the whole bracket assembly, let's see if we could get the camera lined up where I need it to be. The whole bracket assembly is held by one little bolt that actually allows you to pivot the thing so you can try to get some adjustments where need where need be, to line it up with your hoses so you don't have to do too much stretching and bending. One little bolt on the top. It's also a 10 millimeter, just like the bolt that's holding the clamp to the lines. So if you have a problem putting the things back up, lining everything up, just loosen that bolt, give you some extra swing on this bracket right here. It's even got a little tab on there to help you in turning it. So just a little extra piece of info. Okay, got our lines strapped back up to that little bracket. One other thing to make note of, if you can save it, try to save the little plastic or rubber bushing that is used on the metal line with the clamp. That way it'll, first of all, it'll keep the line from having a lot of play, because these straps don't really clamp down completely on the metal lines. They clamp down on the little rubber bushings to help cushion everything. If you can't find those things, or you lost them, or they disintegrated or whatever, you might have to improvise. Maybe wrap them up in electrical tape, or cut a little piece of hose and slit it the long ways and wrap it around the metal tube and then clamp it back up. Whatever works best. But if you can, try to put some type of bushing insulation shit on the metal lines before you put the clamp back up. That way it'll minimize the amount of friction between the line and the bracket itself. But as you can see, we got this shit clamped back up with the remnants of the original rubber bushing thingy on our high pressure side. Everything else is checked, secured. I could put some oil in this garbage and fire it up. Let's do it. Well, looking at everything, we don't have any more gushers. Slide under here, get a better angle right there. Everything looks pretty straight. No leaks. Reservoir's topped off. I more or less bled the lines by turning the wheels back and forth enough to work the oil through the system. Everything seems pretty good, other than some residual oil dripping over there. Everything is straight on that end just as well. Let's try to move over here a little bit. Let's see here. Everything looks straight right there just as well. So, yep. Power steering line is good. Good to go. We get from under this shit. There we go. Everything is good to go. Reservoir is reasonably topped off. I'll go ahead and I'll get this car off this ramp, clean this shit up, and conclude this little job. So, yeah, that's what is involved with a power steering hose, high pressure power steering hose. Low side, low pressure side is pretty much going to be about the same, except that Toyota in their infinite wisdom added a bunch of extra line going to the front and back. It's pretty stupid the way it's set up, but it's about the same. You're going to have to disconnect it from the rack and snake it all out from around the engine and all that garbage. But hopefully we won't get to that. But high side is done. This video is pretty much done. You know what to do. Click the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff, notifications, positive comments. I always try my best to answer questions in a timely manner. So until the next time, go shut this, or get this car off this ramp, clean up, turn this thing off, and I will catch you later.